I sent a tweet the other day. It was a reply to another tweet. I fired it off quickly. It was about 5 words. Didn't think much of it. Thought it would disappear into the ether and nobody would care. It ended up sparking a lot of discussion and gaining traction. And the discussion was about how much luck there is in tennis. Now, I prefer sharing my thoughts on YouTube over Twitter, and it's not particularly close. So I thought I'd make a video. But here's the tweet. Relevant tennis stats and info asked, name the tennis player. Tons of talent, no luck. I replied, there's virtually no luck in tennis. I don't stand by that statement that I made. I don't. It was hyperbolic and it was an overgeneralization where, of course, I didn't really explain myself or provide any sort of explanation. And again, I don't stand by it. There is some luck in tennis. But first of all, I don't regret sending the tweet because I think this is an interesting conversation. Second, the reason I sent the tweet is that what I said comes from a place that I very much do believe in. I believe tennis is an exceptionally fair game. I believe that tennis, compared with other sports, has a whole lot less to do with luck and a whole lot more to do with players' skills, abilities on a given day. When I sent that tweet, I was thinking more about what happens in a match, less so about what happens over the course of a career or over the course of a season. But let's talk about both. First, zoom in. Talk about a tennis match. Compare it to other sports. I think tennis is a lot more fair. There's a lot less luck. The biggest reason is officiating and judgment calls. Judgment calls are the biggest reason why Team A might have played a little bit better than Team B. Team A might have deserved to win. Team A lost. Team B got lucky. Because in all of these sports that we know and love, basketball, soccer, football, hockey, baseball with balls and strikes, all these other sports with penalties, fouls, what's clean, what isn't. There are all these calls that officials, referees, umpires have to make. And first of all, the more opportunity you give a human to make a judgment call, the more opportunity you're giving them to be wrong. That's the first thing. The second thing is sometimes these calls are so close, they're so 50-50, so down the middle, that there really isn't a wrong call because it's subjective. And the outcome rests in the hands of these sequences and the referee's decisions about, well, there was a tackle in the box. Was it a penalty or was it clean? And that right there decides games. We don't have that in tennis. The ball was in, the ball was out. Okay? There's no judgment there. Sometimes incorrect calls are made. Sometimes. It's relatively rare. We generally get it right. But a couple times a match, if there's not electronic lines calling, it can be wrong. And it could sway the outcome of one of the points. It can happen a couple times in a match. And there's also a small margin of error in Hawkeye where that can also be a determining factor sometimes. But it's not very common. And there's no judgment there, which means the humans do a better job. Lines judges get it right way more than not. Other sports, a lot more error happening. So that's one source of luck in sports. Doesn't really exist in tennis. After a Wimbledon final, how often are we like, oh, Federer had it, but Leone screwed it up. Next time, Leone. Not often. It's not a part of tennis. In fact, I don't think one time in my coverage of a important match in tennis have I felt that the umpire actually turned it or any of the lines judges. But it's happened. I don't want to say it hasn't happened in tennis. It has. It's just very rare. Another source of luck in sports is unintentional consequences as a result of fluky bounces. Really common in a sport like hockey, where the puck's bouncing all over the place. Deflections are constant. They happen at high speeds and slim margins. And oftentimes players get lucky. Stuff happens that they weren't even trying to do. Or unlucky. Same thing. The puck takes certain caroms and bounces that it's just kind of random. And sometimes there's broken plays. There can be lucky goals. There can be unlucky goals. Stuff happens. In baseball, a batter's objective is always to make hard contact. But the way it works is sometimes you, as a batter, you achieve your objective. You make hard contact. But by nature of where you hit the ball, where you happened to hit the ball, by chance, it's an out. On the contrary, sometimes you don't make hard contact, and the pitcher actually did well. The batter did poorly. Again, by virtue of the placement of where you hit the ball, you end up getting a hit. That's luck. Batters know sometimes they get lucky. Pitchers know sometimes they get unlucky. Sometimes they get lucky when they allowed hard contact and end up getting an out. Luck happens all the time. The third place, let's talk about tennis. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. Does that happen in tennis? Yes. Net cords. Net cords are lucky. And this is rare. This is pretty rare. Not for you recreational players. Players who are at a lower level, it happens all the time. For players who swing really, really fast and players who are facing opponents with really great movement, this doesn't happen very much. But a shank, you're always trying to hit it in the center of the strings, a shank that turns into a really great, effective shot, that would also be lucky. Doesn't actually happen that often. Even when you mishit the ball and it goes in, usually it's not a very good shot. It doesn't have a lot of, heft, weight to it. And if you go to the public park, you're going to see a lot of accidental shank drop shot winners. Doesn't really happen in the pros. So between net cords and shanks that turn out good, there's another couple of points over the course of a match where luck comes into play. Another thing is conditions. Conditions are very significant in golf, where tee times vary drastically. I can tee off 4 hours before my fellow competitor tees off. I'm out here dealing with 20 miles per hour wind, and it calmed down to 5 miles per hour by the time you teed off. There's another example. Tennis, conditions the same. Both players, they change ends every odd game. Conditions are the same for both. So even though it may advantage a player, it only advantages a player because of their skill set. It's not luck, it's skill. Judges. Sports with judging. Combat sports. Boxing, MMA, figure skating. Need I say more? Sometimes you get, again, the subjectivity where the athletes deserve better than they get, or they get more than they deserve because of the judges. This is all to say that in tennis compared to other sports, more often than not, the player who deserved to win the match won. The player who deserved to lose the match lost. And that is not always the case in other sports. In tennis, we have a unique level of fairness. That is why I said what I said on Twitter. That is why. Now, there's another aspect to this when we zoom out. Longer, bigger picture stuff that doesn't have to do with any one individual match. And in that respect, there is luck. Luck is involved. So let's get the most obvious example out of the way. Draws. Draws are random. There's a construct to them. You have seeded players and unseeded players. Outside of the construct, they are random. And therefore, good draw, bad draw, that is all luck and chance. And it really has a major effect on the course of tennis history, tournament to tournament. Over the course of a career, you got to say that draw luck evens out. You're going to get good ones. You're going to get bad ones. Nobody has ever had a good career or a bad career because of draws. But you could say that players had significant moments in their careers because they took advantage of a good draw. You could say that, a player had an opportunity. This is harder to prove. A player had an opportunity or could have had an opportunity that was, taken away by a draw. There are weird things that have to do with, again, like stuff like draws, like Russians not being able to play Wimbledon this year or Djokovic not being able to get into Australia. That's a tough one. I haven't even thought about that. I didn't know I was going to bring that up before I made this video. But yeah, that's almost a separate category. That's outside of the athletic competition. So I don't think that should actually be involved in the conversation, because ideally none of that stuff ever happens, right? And it's just an equal competition. So that's actually not part of tennis. Okay. Official ruling on Russian ban and COVID issues. That's not part of tennis. None of that had anything to do with tennis. So that is not a part of this conversation. Scrap it. Official ruling. All right. Where was I? Talking about draws. Oh, yeah. I'll add lucky losers. It's in the name, huh? So that's pretty straightforward. Lots of luck when it comes to draws. But perhaps the most interesting part of all of the replies and quote tweets that I got after saying this was injuries. This is interesting. Are injuries luck? The answer is not a yes or no. It's complicated. But the way I look at it, there are freak incidents that happen that maybe some physios out there could argue with this, but I like to look at it as accidental bad luck, freak incidents. We're talking about Del Potro slipping on wet grass and cracking his kneecap. We're talking about Zverev taking a wrong step on the clay and fracturing his ankle. We're talking about Thiem hitting a forehand and rupturing ligaments in his wrist. We're going to say those are freak accidents, and that's bad luck. Thankfully, the majority of injuries in tennis aren't like that. And here's why you can't say, here's why you are wrong if you say that injuries are about luck. All injuries. Injuries aren't about luck, because if they were about luck, you wouldn't have players taking money out of their earnings and paying physios. They are paying experts to help them not get injured. These are not donations. They do not have physios on their team because they hate their money. They have them on their team because they're important, because physios help prevent injury. They invest their money. The players invest their time and effort, hours and hours and hours in the gym every week to try to avoid injury. So how could you say that players who get injured, players who don't get injured, how could you say that is luck? You can't. You just can't. Now, that does not mean that players who get injured a lot don't work hard. It doesn't mean they don't have physios. Of course they do. But guess what? All of this is about genetics. So yes, some players are more injury prone than others. Some of it is hard work. Some of it is smart work. Some of it is genetics. There is a percentage here that is luck, that is chance. There is a percentage that is not. There is durability is an attribute. And if you are going to call players unlucky when they get injured, please be consistent and call the players who don't get injured lucky and see how they take that. They're going to say, I'm not lucky. I work my butt off so I don't get injured. That's not luck. By the way, if you're about to tell me that genetics is also luck, okay, if we're going to go that far down the rabbit hole, if we're going to talk about how Roger Federer is lucky because Lynette happened to meet Robert and then they fell in love and then they had intercourse and then and then Roger came and then Roger was naturally gifted and that's why Roger is lucky. If you are going to go that far, then I give up. Everything is luck then. Everything is luck. Obviously, when a player is born, and also I did see some people say the era that you're born, like when you are born, is also luck. I am not. At a certain point, a line needs to be drawn, which is, to me, that line is drawn after birth, where we are accepting these conditions. This is the human being. This is when they're born. Let's assess how much luck is involved in a tennis career from there, assuming those things to be constants. So there you have it. Is there luck in tennis? Heck yeah, there is. But I believe very, very strongly that tennis is also one of the most fair and just games that humankind has ever created.